I'm Celia Sachs from Warner Brothers Television Publicity, and welcome to our first panel of the afternoon session, The Pride of DC, the Art of LGBTQ Inclusion. On December 8th, history was made with the debut of freedom fighters The Ray, a new animated series on CW Seed that features the first gay superhero to lead a show. However, the inclusion of LGBTQ characters has been an important part of storytelling on screen and in comics for years. Today, we will shine a spotlight on the significance of those characters and how they help to better represent the world around us.
Hi everyone, thanks for coming to the Pride of DC panel. My name is George Gustines, and comics have been a part of my life. When I was growing up, I was watching Batman 66 reruns, and I had a big crush on Robin, and now I get to write about the comic book industry for the Times. I'm honored to introduce this amazing group. We have the comic writer, Steve Orlando. The comic writer, Marguerite Bennett. The executive producer, Greg Berlanti. The actor, Russell Tovey. The comic book writer, Mark Russell. And the comic book writer, Vita Ayala.
Oh, I'm too short. Oh, God.
Thanks, everyone. I'm curious, when you're working on a new project, what's your approach to LGBT inclusion?
Are we starting down the line or jumping in like tag?
Jump in.
Okay. Can you repeat the question?
Sure. When you're approaching a new project, how do you go about including representation?
Personally, in terms of being able to write at DC, I've been blessed to be able to touch characters that are canonically, part of the Pride spectrum. But I think for characters that aren't necessarily explicitly out, if there is ambiguity, then you kind of just push it as far as you can. I mean, that's just me, though. I want to make it as queer as possible.
I just write about the world around me, and there's LGBTQ people in the world that I inhabit, and the stories I tell require the presence of LGBTQ characters, so I just put people in because they're necessary to tell a story about life as it is.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I learn my lines. How you done?
No, I mean, I'm sort of the why not? Like, I'm going to go until they stop me. I write a series called DC Bombshells, which is all of the which is all of the DC heroines in this alternate history of World War II. And so, given just this complete universe as my personal playground, I wanted to, have queer inclusion. And so, I got a lot of folk fussing early on about, like, well, you can't do that. It was the 40s. And, well, it's my 40s. I'm going to go till they stop me.
Yeah, I think, what everyone has been saying is on my mind. What Mark said, the world around me. The key for me, like, will a book feature a diversity of characters? Will a book feature queer, inclusive, and other characters from other communities? Is not even a question. The push for me, and hopefully I've achieved it, is, as he said, the world around us. And that means having enough representation that characters don't have to be the be-all and end-all for the community, and they're allowed to be imperfect, and they're allowed to be more richly layered and real. When I started with Midnighter, he came imperfect out of the box. He's a killing machine, so he was, from the start, not a sterling example for people. But there was the opportunity to still make him confident in his identity as a gay man, confident in his identity as a superhero or a vigilante, while at the same time having imperfections, not being right about everything, and not needing to be everything for the entire queer community. One of the biggest questions I would get is, well, how can you write this character that is going to, it's the first time that a gay male had led a book at DC Comics, how can you write this character that's going to service everybody's experience? And to me, the obligation is not to do that. To me, the obligation is to do a richly textured and respectful portrayal that has passion and life behind it, and then do it again, and then do it again, and then do it again. But make sure the characters are true and fully formed people, because that's the true representation we deserve. Not caricatures, but finally, after 50 years, 75 years, characters.
And also, I think, to jump in on that too, start from a place where you're not assuming that any particular character, if not stated, is straight. So I think that helps write these characters more organically, so that, you know, if you are presented with the opportunity then to make a character queer, then it's not out of left field. I think that not assuming that they're straight is really important, just as a mindset for when you're going into writing.
I would say for me, it was, you know, a lot of work I've done both in comic book genre and outside of it. My career really began when I started really writing about myself and my own real experiences, and being gay was a big part of that, and it actually gave me a lot of opportunities. And so I've always felt like being really true to myself and figuring out a way to express myself through the characters I was writing, you know, was something that was personally rewarding for me, and then, you know, emotionally rewarding for myself and hopefully the audience that you're trying to entertain and captivate. And through the years, it's been a great honor to be a part of that in television. And then when I moved into becoming a shepherd of sorts for you know, other characters' legacies, it was important first and foremost to really sort of, I think, uphold the characteristics of those characters that you responded to as a kid. But then the other part about it was, you know, there's not a day or a week that goes by that we don't work on these characters, that you don't think of yourself as a kid reading those comic books for the first time. And for myself, you know, I too had a crush on Robin, so I can join that. And a little something for our animated Aquaman, but I'm still working through that. I married that, actually. And so...
You've got very good taste.
Anyway, but you were having to sort of twist and turn and imagine, oh, maybe this character's gay, or what about this? And so it's been really nice to be a part of saying, no, these characters actually are gay or LGBTQ, and you know, helping bring them forth and have a generation that is really representative for the next one, and that those kids not having to sort of, I think, imagine those characters, that they actually exist and that they're part of the fabric of that universe.
It's a big moment, I think, that you can, you know, as you're talking about, like, even when I was younger, at best you're searching for coded examples, and you don't, there's no need for that now. Like, the next generation of people growing up won't be where, you know, people who are sitting on the stage were saying, well, maybe, you know, maybe this character, you know, maybe this, you're just like starving for it. You know, you'll have a wealth of opportunity now to know from the beginning that there's nothing to be coded or hidden about.
I mean, that's an incredibly rewarding thing about working with so many younger people. They're the first ones to come into my office and say, well, okay, now they're gay, yes, but now let's make them more complex and interesting and deep and flawed, and it's not so much just, you know, the label, but it's, you know, let's get underneath that and really dramatize the most interesting character we can. And I think that's it's wonderful to already see it sort of the next iteration, I think.
I think all the work that you guys do is incredible, but I wonder, do you worry about being typecast as like gay storytellers?
If I am, I'm not worried about that, I guess. I'll take it.
Please
Good.
do that. Because I'll just continue to push it and make everyone gay.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Excellent. How do you deal with social media, both positive and negative comments?
I'll take that. You just ride with it, I guess. I mean, you're not going to please everyone. Everyone has their own opinion of the world and how they want to be perceived and how they approach the world, and the reactions you get normally are either projections or a reference of their own feelings of the world and the world they're in. So you can't take any of that personally, but when it's positive, it is always better, obviously. The reaction I personally had for playing this character has been overwhelming. I had sort of expectations, but I didn't really realise how important it would be and how exciting it would be to be able to be the Ray and be carrying that kind of torch as the first gay superhero. It's a total honour. And the fact that he went down well and people liked him not went down well, but the character went down well, and people liked him, has been great. Yeah.
I write a comic book about a gay pink lion, Snagglepuss. Yes, thank you. And one of my favorite moments in having written this was they posted an article about it on Comic Book Resources, and there's a picture of Snagglepuss kissing his boyfriend for the article. And one of the commenters wrote, "That panther better be female." And I always find validation in upsetting people, because I feel if you're not upsetting somebody, you're probably not challenging them enough.
Yeah.
You're probably not taking people out of their comfort zone.
Yep.
In which case, what's the point?
Agree.
Steve, have you gotten a lot of feedback to what you're doing in Justice League?
Yeah, a lot of feedback.
All good?
100% good. It's all been good. No, I think what you said about it, it coming from people's own feelings and emotions. I think it's easy. We sit here and we toil for weeks or months or however long it takes to make a given product, and we know everything that went into it, and we know our mindset. But at the same time, when you put something out in the world, you can't really know the lenses that other people are going to look at it with. You can't control that, and you can't know the backstory coming from that. So when you combine that with the power dynamic of access, this is the boring answer of social media perhaps, but anybody can reach you, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you can, you wield a different power than them if you have a certain number of followers, if you have a certain sort of sphere of influence. And I think you need to sort of, I try to show some compassion, because there are people that have strong reactions to things that I've done in Justice League, but you don't know where that's coming from, and at the same time, it doesn't invalidate that, even if the intended purpose of something isn't what I put out there. As Mark said, if you're challenging people, some people may not like it. But people, I genuinely think, positive or negative, people deserve to be heard. It doesn't, I think when responding as people who, all of us have a relatively large sphere of influence on social media, it's easy to think oh, I'm just a person, and you want to flip your finger up and you want to let them know what you want to send vitriol back, but at the same time, there is a power dynamic that I think is humbling to realize, and so I try to listen to everything. I don't always succeed. That's a total lie if I say that I am. But I do try to at least have perspective on what's really going on, because it's not two people discussing in a room. I try to, a creator from Albany once asked me after a local show, "Steve, come over here, you know about things," and that's always a terrible lead-in. And and he was like, "Explain punching down to me." And I was like, "Oh, geez, there were 5 minutes left in this show for me to explain punching down." And I was just trying to say, sort of what we're discussing right now, that yes, if someone says it doesn't matter who it was, but if someone says, "Go to hell, man, your work is a shit garbage fire," because certainly no one's ever said that to me. You can respond, but here's you with 10,000 followers. It's not him and you in a room. It's him and you and everybody that follows you that can pile on, and you don't know, maybe that person was just having a day. You don't know why that set them off, and I think realizing the power dynamic is more important. It was hard for me. I'm from upstate New York. If someone says something bad, I'm ready to say something twice as bad back. But you can't always do that. There's a responsibility inherent in what we do, both as creators putting this product out, but also interacting with people.
I think too, not to reverse that, but also what I found is that if I demand empathy as well, I have to give these people empathy, but I also demand it. I'm going to talk to you as if you were a person, but if you do not respect me just as a basic human being, and if you can't get to a place where we can just be all right, well, we agree or disagree or whatever, then I'm just not going to listen, because I don't owe someone the time and the abuse. No one gets to abuse you. So you can be I'm sorry that you're having a bad day, but I don't have to listen to you tell me to go to hell or call me the very colorful names that people come up with.
Talented.
Talented,
Yeah.
We mentioned Robin and Aquaman earlier. Are there characters that you remember from your childhoods that you identified with and maybe wanted to have them be queer?
Moan L, drawn specifically by Renato Guedes in the James Robinson run.
That
of
was
Action
very
Comics.
quick.
Not to be too specific about
Oh goodness, I mean, poison ivy, and it was like this one vein right here. Always went. Poor baby Marguerite did not know what was happening.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the first character, regardless of my sexual attraction to the character, but like actually like my interest in the character was for me was the Flash and was Barry Allen. That was the one that he was, of all the DC canon, was the guy who just felt like an everyman and felt like I somehow connected with him. He was a science geek. He was a nice guy. He was in awe, as much in awe of the things that were happening to him and around him as I was as the reader. And it felt like at the time like it was like pre-fanboy. It was like he felt like one, and the spirit of that was what sort of drew me in. I think in terms of like being a 13-year-old kid hiding in the back of a comic book shop, realizing I was gay probably at the same time that I was realizing I loved comic books. You know, they were all analogous to me because they were all hiding a part of themselves, and I think that was the most profound element of it, was that they were in hiding, and yet something about them, that same thing that they were hiding, was the thing that made them special. And so that was I remember thinking, if I can get to that moment in my life where I can find this thing about being gay, if I can see that the way they see their abilities as being special, then I'll get to be, you know, everything that I want to be when I grow up. And so that was, you know, and so that was and you know, just to my earlier point, what's great now is kids don't have to do that extra math in their head when they read the amazing work or see the brilliant portrayal of someone like him. You know, they don't have to do that extra gymnastics. They get to just, you know, imagine that they're that character, you know.
Mine was Robin Hood and Little John, but the Disney version, where Robin Hood was a fox. I just thought he was really sexy as a kid. I don't know what that means now, but he was cool. And he had a really husky voice, and he could shoot a bow and arrow. He was my hero as a kid, yeah.
This probably borders on too much information.
Excellent.
But when I was 4 years old, probably one of my earliest sexual experiences, my mom got me this Superman brush from an Avon catalog. And I just remember his body being so muscular and his legs so shapely. And I would just sit there and rub my hand. Wow. I didn't know what was going on. But that was not only, you know, my first sort of awareness of like maybe of like homosexuality or you know, diverse sexuality, but just my first sort of instance of realizing sexuality exists, and it was Superman. I don't know what to do with that now, but there it is.
Have you still got the brush?
I've been looking for that brush for 30 years.
Somebody's got to get that.
Somebody's got that brush.
eBay has that brush.
Yeah,
Oh, I mean, Wonder Woman. So until way too late in my life, embarrassingly late in my life, I thought that she was Puerto Rican like me. And before I was aware of my own, you know, identity, I wanted that for her because she was so strong and so open and so loving and so, to me, such a complete character, such an amazing person. And I was like, that would make her more amazing, because who could stand in the face of Diana and her love? Who could possibly look at Wonder Woman and go, that's wrong? Because even though I didn't know it was me, I grew up in New York City, in the Lower East Side, Alphabet City. If you've seen Rent, that was my neighborhood. And, you know, I grew up around a lot of people, you know, on the pride spectrum, which I like to say because I like light. And I just couldn't fathom why someone could hate so much. And I was like, well, Diana is this ambassador of love. I want that for her. I want her to be able to protect these other people.
How do you guys feel about taking an existing character and revealing something new about them versus creating a new character?
Do both. Always do both. I think it's really interesting, the challenges that you face when you're doing one versus the other. I don't I think that there are pros and cons to both. I think that when you take an established character and kind of unveil this part of their identity, you get a lot of backlash because people have expectations. Whereas with developing a character from the ground up, there are no expectations. It's just whatever's presented, and then that's it. But at the same time, I think you can make a very powerful statement with kind of going into this part of someone's identity. So Diana, for example, that was very powerful for me and very important.
I think a lot of what we do as comic book writers is we mine the depth of the pop culture that came before us. You know, we find the characters that have existed in one form or another for, you know, up to 70 years sometimes, and you find the part of the backstory that has been left out by other people that makes the character meaningful to you. Or you think about like what it would really be like to be that character living in the world it came from. In a way, all writing is sort of an exercise in empathy. And you think about, like for me, as I'm writing Snagglepuss, I think, well, what would it be like to be a gay man working in show business in the 1950s? What demands would the world put on you being in that role? And that's something that's never really addressed in obviously the old cartoons. So the nature of the character itself often tells you how you have to handle the backstory if you are really taking the character seriously.
Okay. I feel you feel like a responsibility, I guess, to the Ray. I didn't know about the Ray. I spoke to Mark Guggenheim on FaceTime, and then he sent me a care package, and I went through and I read all the comics, and I got his kind of origins from the different versions throughout the years, and then we settled on our version of the Ray. And yeah, you wanted to make sure that you, as an actor, I wanted to make sure that people connected to him, wanted to spend time with him, and could, as he's a gay superhero, they could suddenly have someone that they could project onto and have as their hero. And I felt a responsibility for that, and I wanted to make sure that he was, above everything else, entertaining and likable, so you'd want to spend time with him, so that the fact that he's gay just becomes a byproduct and it doesn't define him. And I think through the writing of him, the animation especially just completely exposes that fleshes this guy out and gives him a total truth and backstory. And that for me was something that I wanted to get right. I didn't want to let people down.
You guys were talking before about hopefully we'll reach a tipping point where there's enough queer characters out there, so some of them can be villains and just assholes, and some of them are angels. You get the full range. But like, what do you think that tipping point looks like? Like, what do we need to get there? Is it more TV shows, more comics? Like, how do we get there?
Huh.
Well, I think we already feel a freedom to, explore different elements of the characters that happen to be LGBTQ. Now, that being said, I think we're still far ways off in the sense of the amount of representation that could truly exist. I think, I think we're all probably passionate about having more of it in the books and having more of it on the shows and having more roles to play, that, the more colors of the world that they're kind of represented out there. I think the more, only because, I just know for myself, like when I watch something, we were watching back the short you guys saw, and just seeing like a clip of a gay superhero in a bar talking to a gay guy, like it fills this need in you that you're like, I didn't even know I had that I needed to still see that at 45 years old. And so I just think that in my mind that there's still such a distance. And then hopefully as that comes, I think people will probably feel, hopefully, as a fan or an audience member myself of the books and characters, you feel less pressure on each character. When we're writing with a little bit less pressure of, well, if I make this choice, will I offend this group of people because there's not that many characters who are in a relationship, and if I take them out of this relationship, is that going to be bad? Or if if this thing happens or that thing happens, I think the more free we are to sort of create and bring our passion to it, but that time's not yet, and that's why representation really matters now more than ever, I think.
And I think a lot of the responses, if they are sort of energized, shall we say, in that respect, come from a fear that there's not going to be more.
Right.
It becomes more urgent. when we started Midnighter, we decided that he was going to be not with Apollo at the beginning of the book, and there was some pushback to that. And it was interesting, just so much of the views on marriage in general and what it is to be like a single gay man who's like living a sex-positive life came to light very, very quickly. You know, the responsibility that we've talked about. Well, if he's going to be single, are you going to, you know, jokingly, is he going to be on Grindr? Not jokingly, are you going to show condoms? You know, like, and all these things come into play. And, you know, all those things were true. He was on Grindr. We did show condoms. It's called Hook in the DC universe, but he was on it. But anyway, but I think the fears of that come from, as I said, the worry that, contrary to what we're saying, it's going to end. You know, so right now, every character has to. It's like, well, we might not get another chance. And so I understand the passion, even if the reality is the character can't be everything for everyone. I know where the passion comes from. It's fear. It's a worry that we're not going to get more. But as you're saying, it's not actually happening. It is continuing. So hopefully we get a chance to, as you said, spread out and do more and fill those needs with individual characters.
I think part of getting to this place where we assuage these fears is just keep doing it. And I don't mean just keep doing like the safe story. I think it is making them complex villains. It is, you know, going in and going, you know, breaking up this relationship maybe. It is just keep doing it because you just have to populate it and you can't wait. You can't have all of these characters. Me and Marguerite were talking about this earlier, where you have these kind of like almost, you know, sanitized stories because we want to, you know, they all want to be role models, but you can't do that. You just have to normalize like we do with everything else.
Well, villains is a sticking point. I'd be interested to hear all of your opinions on it, because on one hand, obviously, like, it in some ways it's the last frontier, because I feel like as a creator, you can certainly have a queer villain, but he can't be a villain because he's queer. You know,
agree.
It can't be the reason it can't be the signifier that he's evil. I just always remember, like, this is a terrible example because who would expect this movie to deliver something nuanced, but Rambo, the most recent one, it was like, you know, he's fighting some Southeast Asian dictator who is already, you know, a murderer and a totalitarian, but of course he's also a gay child molester, you know, with this protracted scene where he's about to, you know, do something bad to some young-looking villager, and Rambo comes in and, like, rips his throat out, you know? And, like, to me, that, without saying, that's not what we need. But his queerness was in there not as a neutral part of his character. It was the signifier of his evil. So I feel like, I don't know, I'm interested because, yeah, there's that worry that you're demonizing queer elements if you have someone who's a villain and who is queer, but there has to be, as you're saying, Vita, like, we have to go there. How do we go there?
I mean, you exactly what you said. You don't make the queerness the defining villain part of them. But I've seen that done before, and I've seen that done well, you know, in different instances where you're like that, either queer coding because we're all master decoders having come from generations before, but also, you know, more contemporary stuff where you're like, oh, that character is a terrible person but happens to be queer, but they're not out there, you know, showing that villainy through their queerness.
So much of it is just more. I mean, just so, you know, each queer relationship won't have to stand in for all queer relationships. Each queer character won't have to speak to every experience. And, you know, I guess the finish line in my brain is where it gets to the point that, you know, cis, het, you know, white male is no longer the default. There no longer has to be, well, why is this character a woman? Well, why does this character have to be queer? Well, why does this character have to be black? Where it's no longer having to argue, you know, well, because people exist. I mean, I feel like that's a pretty basic answer.
That is a question that I'm sure you've all got. You've got
yeah.
Vita, Marguerite. I'm sure you probably deal with it too, Greg, when you're pitching things to people. It's like when you're pitching a character, in my experience, if they want to be queer, there's the question of, well, you know, we're totally fine with that if it's organic to the story. And like no one would say, well, they can be straight if it's organic to the story.
You just smile, you just go, it will be. Let me tell you.
So that's what I want, is that no longer the immediate assumption is, this is, of course, the natural protagonist that you would have, and that you have to then validate and verify the reasons that there would be any deviation from this expected norm. I want to kill the idea that this is the norm. There are other norms.
Folks,
No, sorry.
very good. There are microphones set up. We're going to take questions from the audience if you want to line up.
There you go.
Awesome. Thank you so much for this dope panel. I really love the depiction of Mr. Terrific on Arrow. As a nerd, as a gay nerd, I love the representation of non-heteronormative superheroes, and to also add to the fact that it's a gay black man, it just resonates so much with me. With that in mind, I'm thinking about the ways in which invisibility is challenged first by identity validation, by first just having that representation. But the deeper challenge is to do away with the idea of monolithic depictions. And so as we see more and more characters who challenge the idea of heteronormativity, I'm wondering when it comes to within the development process, if there's a lot of thought given to still challenging the monolith. And oftentimes that monolith turns into, as you were saying, cis het white, or not het, but cis gay men, as opposed to the many other forms of queerness that are out there.
Well, that was an incredibly intelligent question. And a fair and accurate one. I think there is. I mean, I think that's the part of what we're, I think, all feeling and talking about is the next sort of wave. I mean, I do think we don't have an active trans character across the shows, you know, and we had a trans actress playing a trans character in a show I did that was not a superhero show, you know, 11 years ago. And so I still feel behind the times every day on that issue. So, I mean, you know, and it's, so you're simultaneously, you know, in addition to this, you're also just trying to make the best show you can make, because that's where the real power, your power comes from to make those other creative decisions. And so, you know, if the characters are interesting and if you fill the rooms of the people you're working with in front of and behind the camera with diverse people, that maybe didn't walk your walk in life and have lived a life that's different from yours, but you trust their passion, they'll bring those ideas to you the same way you just brought this great question, you know? And so we're very open to it, the people at, you know, where I work, and the studio and the network, to expanding the horizons of what it means to have this kind of representation. And we do it, we take that seriously as we take the actual DNA of the characters and the history of the characters seriously. And that's how, and the economics of that, as you explain it to everybody, are, well, the more that these characters represent the world that we all live in, the more people are going to want to read them and buy them and watch them and, you know, participate in them. And so, I guess the short answer of me answering your question is just yes. You know, like yes, we agree. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to the left.
Hi. It would be easy to argue that it's appropriate for an LGBTQ person to be writing or playing an LGBTQ character, much more sensitive to the roles and the issues. What I'm kind of worried about is there any chance of a backlash where they'll come back and say, well, frankly, it's inappropriate for an LGBT person to be playing a straight person. Are you worried about or writing about a straight person? Do you think there's any backlash that might come?
I think that it becomes a false equivalence about power dynamics, because in order to survive, queer people have to learn to identify and function within a predominantly straight culture. But that is not true when these things are reversed. And so already there has to be a level of sympathy and understanding, you know, for queer characters, for straight characters, especially if that's all you've been given, you know, through your whole childhood, these like rare gems of queer representation scattered throughout. Where, you know, for a straight, you know, performer or writer, you know, looking into authentically depicting a queer experience, they have not necessarily had that level of experience or done that level of research. I mean, I do ultimately think that, you know, if you know, just do your damnedest. That, like, I'm down for anyone to try to write anything, but you have to be prepared to be criticized for it, and you have to just do it well enough. Is the big philosophy for me.
As a non-LGBTQ writer writing a gay character, the way I approach this sort of struggle in my own mind is that if I want to work towards inclusivity, that really means two different things. Well, on one hand, you need more LGBTQ characters in pop culture, in the medium, and on the other hand, it means more LGBTQ people creating and being involved in the creation process. And I think it's critical that we don't make those two goals enemies of each other. That we make sure that we're including more LGBTQ people in the creation of not only LGBTQ stories, but of stories and pop culture in general. And then at the same time, as a cis heterosexual male writer, making sure that I'm writing about the world around me and its complexity and humanizing the characters, viewing the characters I write with the depth of humanity. That's, to me, writing is ultimately about empathy, and empathy means not just writing or not just feeling that for people who are like you, but creating reasonable, complex, and lovable characters who are nothing like you.
We'll come back.
Hey, my question's for Marguerite. You work on both Bombshells and Batwoman, both phenomenal, obviously.
Thank you.
One is a bit more mainstream than the other, though. I was wondering if there are differences in the leniencies and restrictions and what you're allowed to put in one over the other, or is it more up to the content creator?
Oh, well, I mean, with Batwoman, I'm working within a larger universe, and so it's, one giant group project of all of these writers and artists and editors and, just everyone in-house working together to create a huge and functional universe, whereas Bombshells is my universe. And so I work mostly, with Jim Fletcher and Aunt Lucia, who are the designers for the new statues and merchandise coming out. And beyond that, the editors are wonderful, where it's like, this is maybe a little too dark, for the tone that you've set. They're wonderful in terms of story, but, they've given me so much freedom. And, I just, there wasn't like a moment where I was like, I'm gonna make everything queer. It just sort of happened. It was like, everyone is queer unless explicitly stated otherwise. But they've been nothing but supportive. And it's been really delightful just to, have this complete universe that's just, female and queer and brown and fun.
Hi, my question is about today in particular. The last 3 panels that we've had have contained really relevant conversations, but they've separated out identities in a way that doesn't always reflect our lived experiences. So I was wondering if you all had advice on how we as an audience can demand representation that reflects and normalizes the intersection of our identities.
Vote with your dollar. Buy the books that you see that are doing the things that you want, and support the people that are creating them, and really just spread that too. I think, like, hey, you should read this book because there's this character who, all right, so Steve and I are writing a book, co-writing a Supergirl issue, and there's a character who is brown and also NB, and that was really important to both of us because this is a complex character that doesn't have to be everything for everybody. It just, it was just a story that had to be told about this experience from this perspective.
So one of the things he had brought up to you was about straight characters being written into being or made into LGBTQ characters or vice versa. I noticed that in the Crisis of Earth X for the Ray and Citizen Cold, how were you able to just transition? Was he already an LGBTQ character on Earth X before, or was this something that is a new development?
We definitely wanted the Ray to have a partnership on Earth X and to reveal that. I mean, one of the things that we were really proud of with that was, that's our mega event that we do across 4 nights, and we spend extra millions upon millions upon millions and millions of dollars to present something that we think is as cinematic and as big as possible all year. And 2 of the major storylines in it were, LGBT storylines, and we had 2 separate couples. It's just, I've had a number of parents with kids call me and say that was the first time that they saw 2 superheroes kiss. And so those kind of things were exciting. So we knew that was part of what we wanted to do with that. We still wanted to make an incredibly entertaining 4 hours, of an event for everybody. And so Citizen Cold, and knowing that Wentworth Miller, who's also is an openly gay actor, was going to play the part, and that we could twist the character. I actually this is where my own comic book limited knowledge comes into play, because I stopped reading when I was about 19, 20 years old, and will only read certain comic books as they come through the office now. I don't know if Citizen Cold is gay in the comic books. I know we wanted him and had him be gay on Earth X, but I don't know if you guys know better than I do if he's. He might be now. Well, the Ray came about because CW Seed said we want to have a gay character that we want to do on CW Seed, as we did with Vixen last year, and so we went to DC, and they mentioned, how about the Ray? We started working on it. You started working on it, and so sometimes it happens the other way too, where we're all in concert.
Star Labs.
Hi, I've been a Russell fan since Being Human days.
Thanks.
Way back. And with the Ray, I actually got to sit down my 13-year-old and my 11-year-old and watch the Ray. And it opened the door to have the conversation with my children that they can be whoever they want to be, do whatever they want to do, and I have their back more than 100%. With 35, we were raised in a different society, ultra-conservative parents, so I want them to know that I've got them. They won't be afraid to come to me.
That's lovely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And some special people say hi from across the pond.
Hi.
They're watching now.
One of the best things. Thank you very much for that. That's amazing. That's just.
They actually sent something for you.
I'm gonna grab that in a minute.
Okay.
That's beautiful. Just following from you, one of the best things that happened from this whole experience for me is that someone on Instagram tweeted me a picture of their son, and they said there were two dads, and they said that their son was watching The Flash, and he ran into the kitchen, and he said, Dad, the two superheroes are doing what you're doing on TV. And for the first time ever, this kid had seen his dads represented on TV as superheroes kissing each other. And for that little boy, that was magical. And for them dads, they were like, that was magical for them. And they contacted me, reached out to me and told me. And above anything else I will ever do for the rest of my life, that is one moment that I was like, that's made a difference. That's done something. That's affected the chromosomes of that child. And the ripples of that are going to go, I don't know where, but that felt incredibly special. So for everything, what you're saying just now,
that's exactly what I want for my children.
That's amazing. And they, that seed's in there now, and they've watched that. And if one of your kids are gay, they will feel so safe to come to you and feel they've got someone.
Question.
Yeah, safe. Yeah.
Yep,
so
that's all
thank
I
you.
want.
Yeah, well, you're a wonderful mum.
Hi. How do you incorporate different parts of their characters that you write, personalities and their bonds to their family or their loved ones, and use it to push them along their stories and help motivate them to do stuff that without those bonds or traits they might not have done?
I think that's a huge question. No, I think no, not at all. Don't apologize. How do you do it? Knowledge of the character. Character is action, and so you have to, in relation to, their a character's family makeup or supporting cast. You load that cast with drivers, whether they're positive drivers or negative drivers, and that informs a lot of the decisions, as you said, the characters will make. Who you want your character to be, and then you reverse engineer, at least that's what I do, how you want them to get there. And that comes from the positive, negative influences in their life in relation to their family. As I said, you want these, your family is such a strong motivator for us often in our adulthood. That is really your chance to seed the core characteristics of a character when you build that backstory. Were their parents supportive? Did they, were they not supportive? Look how many iconic characters where the entire web of their characterization comes from their parents. Needless to say, Batman. When they brought the flashback, they updated with the murder of his mother, because you need that flashpoint, no pun intended, that sent them on the path. Same with Hal Jordan's father dying. this is where, and many times, like those are that's where the seed is planted of everything else that is going to come out of these characters. So really, it's about just truly knowing the core of your character and the world they inhabit. That's our job anyway, I think. But when you know that, you know how to combine these different elements in a way that gives you the alchemy of story.
Yeah, that's great.
Guys, I want to thank everyone for coming. I'm being told that we're out of time, but thank you all for coming here. Thank you to all the panelists.
Thank you.